I heard that you like APAC. So here we are. As I sat down to catch up on this region, there were two major conclusions that I came to. One, the meta here is way different than in North America. While the NA teams like to play a lot of double shield with Ashe, the majority of APAC play is under a Sombra dive meta. Because of this, I see more than ever now how it's just unfair to try and compare teams across regions. Secondly, while NA has a pretty set-in-stone team hierarchy, like the higher seed won every single game in the Melee, APAC is way less defined. Basically, any team could come out on top here depending on how they're feeling. It really is the Wild West out here, which is ironic given that it's happening in the East. That's why this tournament was so great. There were so many close, exciting games packed into this weekend. With individual clutches and stellar team play present, I mean, what is there not to love? So how are the 7 APAC teams looking at the end of the Melee? Once again, let's take a look from worst to first. London were supposed to be the basement dwellers of this region. This is a team that went through a complete rebuild, replacing their proven championship-winning core with a group of fresh, under-the-radar rookies. London was written off as a long-term project months before the season started. No way they'd be a threat now, maybe a year or two down the line. But much like the Valiant on the other side of the pond, London has utilized their top-tier scouting and coaching to make a team that's worth way more than the sum of its parts. I was actually fairly high on JMac and Bernard in the preseason. I thought they would have a decent amount of success in Owl, and they have. And Hiley has been a pretty solid flex support, just like he was for Sol last season. But those were the only constants in my mind. I was blown away by how well the rest of the team has performed. I knew that Glister was an explosive DPS player, but I didn't expect him to be as impactful as he is. The dude has turned into the hit-scan hard carry that they desperately need, a constant threat on the Ashe. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that Ashe is a big reason why London tends to prefer the double shield comp that we see a lot in NA. Sanguinar has some polishing to do, but he has been playing a serviceable main support all season, and when Echo came into the meta, so did a new player for London, Although. And I can see why the former Gen S player is here. He has a good understanding of Echo's abilities and plays around his teammates really well. London is by no means a perfect team, not even close. They lack a true superstar flex DPS to pair with Glister, and just about every player here shows their inexperience from time to time. But if you had told me 2 months ago that this team would be taking the Shanghai Dragons to map 5, I would have laughed in your face. Yet London has proven that they will punish you if you make the mistake of underestimating them. I can't wait to watch this group as they continue to grow. Chengdu is a team that, if you watched any of Season 2, you would know for their chaotic, unorthodox playstyle led by Among's electric Wrecking Ball. That's why when I sat down to watch the Hunters' quarterfinal match against the NYXL, I was surprised to see that this team had sort of reined themselves in. Instead of his signature Wrecking Ball, which is a valid choice for a dive comp that we saw this team use several times last season, Chengdu decided to put Among on Winston instead. And while Winston is the meta pick, he's been a massive hole in Among's hero pool. So much so that on his Chinese contenders team, Moss 7 Club, Among, who went by Vanessa at the time, would rather play Diva in dive comps because his Winston was just so bad. So how did he do? It sure didn't hurt that he had Molly and Langsa constantly working to enable him. I could rave about Molly's Ana all day, but when you have Jonak on Twitter praising him, I don't think anything more needs to be said. In addition, Leave has been just as good as advertised, slotting in to become the ultimate flex DPS that this team really needed. Unfortunately, Chengdu came up short against a team that they could have beaten, and I think it comes down to their comfort. Over the offseason, Chengdu decided that they were going to switch their focus into learning the meta instead of practicing their strengths, and players like Among and Jinmu have had trouble adjusting to that and playing at the same level as last season. I'm honestly not sure if Chengdu will be able to make everything click like they'd envisioned. The Hangzhou Spark are an enigma. They were the favorites going into their matchup against the Seoul Dynasty. They had successfully taken down London in their qualifying matches, and meanwhile, Seoul looked to be all over the place, having no idea what their playstyle was in this new meta. The Spark have incredibly talented pieces like Gushui, Godsby, and IDK, who are counted among the best in the world. But Hangzhou got completely wrecked in this match, probably the most lopsided match of the weekend. And it wasn't because this team isn't good. Over the course of the match, Hangzhou proved that they had the individual talent to hang with their opponents. No, this game was lost in the front booth, as Hangzhou consistently got out-comped, out-rotated, and just out-coached by their opponents. Mask and U4 got humbled in that game. But that isn't to say that this team doesn't have some improvements to make, as Assassin on off-tank and Adora on flex DPS stick out as obvious weak points to exploit. Luckily, help is on the way. Pajian, the former coach of Vancouver, is here to assist and hopefully improve on the coaching staff, and Architect is joining up from the shock. Architect kinda got shoved to the sidelines due to all of the world-class DPS on the San Francisco roster, but this dude is really good and can play just about anything. He's definitely an improvement over Adora, not to mention that the former X6 gaming player is reuniting with former teammates like Godsby, Rhea, and Bebe, and his head coach Mask. Hangzhou is going into the Summer Showdown with a few shiny new toys. They're currently in 10th place overall, and if they're gonna turn around their season and replicate last year's success, it has to start right here. Now or never. New York is in a very strange spot at the moment, because their entire identity as a team is shifting before our very eyes. In Seasons 1 and 2, New York was praised for their reactive playstyle. Not necessarily aggressive or passive, but adapting on the fly based on how their opponents were playing. And don't get me wrong, they played this style very well, but New York always fell just a bit short of their ultimate goals because the best teams in the world were able to figure them out. Now, slowly but surely, New York are adding pieces meant to change up their entire philosophy as a team. The first move was Hotba, whose aggressive way of playing D.Va and Zarya is way different than Mekko. Then there was a shift in the coaching staff, as Pavane left the team for London and IMT took his place. And now, we may be looking at 2 more players meant to continue this shift. The first one is obvious, Haxel. Last season's Rookie of the Year recipient joins an already stacked DPS line where he has to fight Libero and Who Are You for a starting spot. Whether he will see the stage is unknown, but New York now has yet another fantastic flex DPS to work with. And the second is Mondu. This pickup has been sort of swept under the rug as Mondu has been inactive due to age restrictions until this point, but the former O2 Blast player wowed in contenders, and many expect him to take the starting slot from Onimo soon, if not immediately. New York came up short against Shanghai in the May Melee, but I can't blame them too much for that, as the team is going through a sort of semi-rebuild right now. At 10-3 overall, New York is still in a great position to make the playoffs, and then we'll see for sure if the moves that the Excelsior made will pay off. Guangzhou are a team with high highs and low lows. They earned the number 1 seed fair and square by going undefeated in their qualifying matches, only to bow out in their first, admittedly hard-fought game of the tournament. Why is this? Well, for the most part, this is the same Guangzhou that you know and love from last year. Rio, Eileen, Nero, Happy, Chara Shu, they're all back and better than ever. Clearly improved from last season as the synergy has continued to grow. Special shout out to Chara, who had to fill in after Neptuno ran into visa issues and has done a great job so far. And then you have the newcomer Krong, who I've been very impressed with. The former O2 off-tank has shown a lot of talent on every hero he's asked to play, which is very important because I've noticed that the Charge are the most compositionally diverse team in the APAC region. They play the dive, they play the double shield, they play the Rein Orisa, they even play a good amount of Rein Zarya, which we don't see very much of right now. And while they're having a lot of success against lower tier teams by being good at all sorts of comps, Seoul was able to come out on top in the semis because they were great at just 2 or 3. The Charge are a team with all sorts of potential and flexibility, but I wonder if their refusal to commit to a signature comp is hurting them in the long run. In the Melee, the Seoul Dynasty finally met the expectations that we all had of them in the preseason. Taking the core of the former London Spitfire and mixing them in with their current team was no easy task, as we saw in the qualifying matches. The Dynasty looked frazzled and uncoordinated, Prophet struggled to master Echo, it was a mess, and it got them the last seed in the tournament. But when the Melee started, Seoul came out with an entirely new look. At the beginning of the season, I thought that Gesture and Marvel would be fighting for the starting main tank spot, with Michelle guaranteed as the only off-tank. But as it turns out, no. Marvel's D.Va is actually pretty dang good, and it gives this team the ability to swap on the double shield comps which they run more often than most. And on DPS, I mean, when you have Prophet on your team, who could have guessed that Fitz would be the most electric DPS on the field? I mean, Prophet has been steadily improving on Echo, but he's still not great yet. Meanwhile, Fitz has obviously been grinding up his hit scan, and this dude's Ashe and Widow are straight up unfair to play against. And then in the backline, Toby and Bedosin are doing okay. They struggled hard in the qualifiers. I think there were some initial synergy issues, but in the melee, they did a pretty good job, giving the rest of their team opportunities to pop off, which I'm sure they appreciated. A lot of people wrote off Seoul at the start of the tournament, called them washed up. But that weekend, the Dynasty finally proved why they were rated so highly at the beginning of the season. If they can keep up this level of play, Seoul will be a force to be reckoned with as we start to look forward to the playoffs. Listen, I know it's almost insulting at this point to go from 0-40 to this. The Shanghai Dragons of today have absolutely nothing in common with the Dragons of 2017, except I guess their owners. But every time I look at the Dragons, I'm just so amazed at how effective they were at identifying their problems and turning around their misfortunes. Between seasons 1 and 2, they turned from a laughingstock to a contender. And between seasons 2 and 3, they turned from a contender to a powerhouse. Now there was a lot of talk about Shanghai throwing maps 2 and 3 against Seoul for putting in DM in stand 1, but I get the idea. Shanghai wanted to play a lot more double shield Ashe comps in those maps, so it makes sense to put in DM, your sniper specialist, and then you have stand 1 whose more passive playstyle is more suited to the comp. The problem is that Shanghai just wasn't quite as good at it. While it might have worked against teams like London, Seoul was able to beat them. It's their dive where they really shine. Like, there's so many fantastic stories on this team, like Void blending into the background on the Gladiators, finally getting the respect he deserves as a world-class off-tank. Lee Jae-gon and his wild playstyle, which is backed up wholeheartedly by Izayaki and Luffy. How about Lip, who came out of nowhere in the off-season to become a legitimate Rookie of the Year candidate thanks to his fantastic Sombra and a decent Ashe when his team needs it. Fleta, whose career up to this point could be summarized as the best player on a bad team, finally getting good players around him and a title under his belt. And Fearless, who was a part of the 0-40 squad, went back to contenders for a season, and came back to become what most consider to be the best Winston in the game right now. What I was most impressed with, though, was Shanghai's clutch factor. They always came through in key moments, whether that's Fleta getting big picks, Lit with a huge EMP, Fearless expertly controlling his primal rage to get picks in the backline, or Lee Jae-gon taking the enemy off guard with his aggression. The finals in particular were electrifying. Shanghai had to reverse sweep to win it, but I've learned that this is a team that plays best when their backs are up against the wall. This was the best match of the season so far, and I highly recommend watching it if you haven't yet. Shang 9s aside, maps 4 through 7 of the series are the reasons why I say that the Shanghai Dragons just might be the best Overwatch team in the world. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a like and subscribe for more Overwatch League content. Can we hit 26,000 subscribers again? That would be so funny. Anyways, what did you think about the APAC Melee, and who are you rooting for in the upcoming Summer Showdown? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, all that good stuff is in the description. Until next time though, that's all from me. Don't get tilted.